Gunshots echoed through the VIP lounge before the appetizer even dropped. Blood stained the imported linen, and suddenly, a high-stakes underworld summit was plunging into deadly chaos because of a missing translator. No one expected a plus-sized apron-wearing waitress to step in command the room and change everything. Celia Higgins, at 250 pounds, was entirely accustomed to being invisible. In the high-end, fiercely competitive culinary world of Lombardi's prime in downtown Chicago, she was the heavy-set waitress that the wealthy patrons looked right through. They saw the crisp white apron, the meticulously tied-back brown hair, and the tray of expensive hors d'oeuvres, but they rarely saw the woman holding them. Celia didn't mind the invisibility. In fact, she relied on it. Being overlooked meant nobody asked why a former linguistic prodigy from Georgetown University, a girl who once published a thesis on dialectic shifts in Eastern European syntax under Dr. Percival Penhaligon, was serving veal Milanese to corporate snobs. She had dropped out 2 years ago when her father's pancreatic cancer treatments drained their family's savings, leaving her drowning in medical debt, and entirely alone after he passed. Now her world consisted of sore arches, chafing thighs, and the stifling heat of a commercial kitchen. She sought comfort in food, her weight creeping up as a protective shield against a world that had repeatedly kicked her while she was down. It was a stormy Tuesday night when the atmosphere in Lombardi's prime shifted from upscale dining to suffocating tension. The general manager, a nervous man named Albert, was sweating profusely as he locked the front doors at 9 p.m., turning the open sign to closed, despite the dining room being completely empty, save for the private back room. "Celia," Albert hissed, grabbing her elbow. "Table 7, the private enclave. You are the only one serving them tonight. No eye contact. Do not speak unless spoken to. Pour the wine, drop the plates, and vanish. Do you understand?" "Who are they?" Celia asked, adjusting her apron, feeling the familiar, uncomfortable tug of the fabric across her wide hips. "People who can buy and sell the Chicago Police Department," Albert muttered. Celia nodded her heart, kicking into a steady, anxious rhythm. She loaded up her heavy silver tray with crystal decanters of Barolo wine and approached the heavy oak doors of the private enclave. Pushing the door open with her hip, she slipped inside. The room was thick with cigar smoke and palpable danger. Sitting at the head of the long mahogany table was Dante Romano. Celia recognized him immediately from the whispered rumors in the kitchen. Dante was the undisputed head of the Romano Syndicate, a man who possessed the kind of brutal, sharp-edged beauty that made women stare and men cross the street. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that clung to his broad shoulders. His dark eyes were cold, calculating, and currently burning with barely suppressed rage. Seated around him were 4 other men, each radiating their own brand of lethality. There was Victor Ivanov, a heavily scarred Russian Bratva boss; Luc Dubois, an arrogant-looking Corsican smuggler; Klaus Richter, a German arms distributor; and Mateo Garcia, a cartel liaison from Madrid. The problem Celia realized within 30 seconds of silently pouring the dark red wine was that nobody could understand a damn word anyone else was saying. "Where the hell is Leo?" Dante barked, his deep, gravelly voice slicing through the heavy air. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the crystal glasses. "He was supposed to be here 20 minutes ago. I cannot broker a $500 million port agreement if I can't speak to these bastards." His underboss, a nervous man named Tommy, swallowed hard. "Boss, Leo's car was found at the bottom of the Chicago River an hour ago. He's gone. Someone tipped off the Irish." Dante cursed loudly in Italian, a string of vicious, colorful expletives about someone's mother that made Celia blink. She kept her head down, expertly avoiding the men's elbows as she set down plates of calamari. "What is he saying?" Victor growled in thick, heavily accented English, looking suspiciously at Dante. He insults us. Non, je pense qu'il est juste incompétent. Luc Dubois sneered in French, leaning back in his chair. No, I think he is just incompetent. Ich habe keine Zeit für diese unprofessionelle Scheiße, Klaus muttered in German, checking his gold Rolex. I don't have time for this unprofessional shit. Dante rubbed his temples, his jaw clenched so tight it looked ready to snap. Look, gentlemen, he tried speaking slowly in English. My translator. He met with an accident. But the deal for the shipping lanes at O'Hare and the docks remains exactly the same. We share the routes, 20% cut for each family. Mateo Garcia shook his head, his face flushing red. No, acordamos el 30%. Estás intentando estafarme, Romano. No, we agreed on 30%. You are trying to scam me. Romano Victor stood up, his massive frame towering over the table. You think Bratva take 20% after we secure the harbor guards? You are a fool, Romano. Victor slipped his hand inside his tailored jacket, resting it on the grip of a concealed weapon. The temperature in the room plummeted. Klaus and Luke also shifted their own hands, moving toward their waistbands. Dante's men standing by the door drew their weapons, the metallic clack of safeties being clicked off, echoing loudly in the quiet room. Celia stood frozen against the floral wallpaper, a silver tray clutched to her chest. She was watching a massacre unfold over a simple, catastrophic miscommunication. Matteo thought Dante was changing the deal from 30 to 20%. Victor thought Dante was taking credit for the harbor guards. Luke thought Dante was weak. Klaus was just impatient. Dante stared at the men, realizing his empire and his life was about to end in a bloodbath over a missing translator. He braced himself, his hand reaching for the beretta at his hip. Wait! A soft, trembling voice echoed. Nobody moved. 5 pairs of lethal predatory eyes snapped toward the corner of the room. Celia swallowed hard, her heart hammering violently against her ribs. She felt massive, clumsy, and entirely out of her depth under their collective, terrifying gaze. She was just the fat waitress, the invisible girl, but she couldn't watch 5 men shoot each other over a grammatical misunderstanding. What the hell did you say? Dante hissed, his eyes narrowing at Celia, as if seeing her for the first time. He took in her flushed, round face, the stained white apron, the way she was trembling. Get out of here before you catch a bullet, sweetheart. Celia didn't move. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the tray. She looked directly at Viktor Ivanov, who had his gun halfway drawn. Он не пытался вас оскорбить. Celia said, her voice suddenly steady, her Russian accent flawless, dripping with the precise Moscow inflection she had spent 3 years perfecting. He wasn't trying to insult you. Он сказал 20% от чистой прибыли, а не от валовой. С учетом того, что вы контролируете охрану порта, ваша доля в чистой прибыли фактически превышает 35%. He said 20% of the net profit, not the gross. Factoring in your control of the harbor guards, your net share actually exceeds 35%. Victor froze his hand, halting on his gun. He stared at the heavy-set waitress in absolute shock. Ты говоришь по-русски? You speak Russian, и я умею считать, Celia replied smoothly. And I know how to do math. Before Victor could recover, Celia turned her attention to Luc Dubois. She shifted her posture, channeling the haughty, crisp elegance of Parisian syntax. Monsieur Dubois, il n'est pas incompétent. Il vient de perdre son traducteur à cause d'un coup monté par les Irlandais. Si vous tirez maintenant, vous perdez les routes de contrebande de l'Est pour toujours. Soyez raisonnable. Monsieur Dubois, he is not incompetent. He just lost his translator to an Irish hit. If you shoot now, you lose the eastern smuggling routes forever. Be reasonable. Luke's mouth parted slightly. the sneer wiped completely off his face. Celia didn't stop. She pivoted to Klaus Richter, her tone dropping into sharp, authoritative German. Herr Richter, Sie sind ein Geschäftsmann. 10 weitere Minuten werden Ihren Zeitplan nicht ruinieren. Aber ein Schusswechsel wird Millionen kosten. Setzen Sie sich hin. Mr. Richter, you are a businessman. 10 more minutes will not ruin your schedule, but a shootout will cost millions. Sit down. Klaus blinked, looking from Celia to Dante, clearly bewildered, but slowly his hand moved away from his jacket. Finally Celia turned to Matteo. She offered him a gentle, placating smile, softening her voice into melodic, rapid-fire Spanish. Señor García, hubo un error de traducción en los correos electrónicos de la semana pasada. Romano siempre tuvo la intención de que usted se quedara con el 30% de las armas de fuego. El 20% es solo para la distribución de narcóticos. Nadie le está estafando. Mr. Garcia, there was a translation error in last week's emails. Romano always intended for you to keep 30% of the firearms. The 20% is only for the narcotics distribution. No one is scamming you. Matteo let out a long breath, visibly relaxing his shoulders. Madre mia, he whispered, staring at Celia as if she were a descending angel. The room fell into a stunned, deafening silence. The men slowly sat back down in their leather chairs, their weapons sliding back into holsters. Disaster had been averted in less than 90 seconds. Dante Romano stood completely motionless at the head of the table. He was staring at Celia with an intensity that made her skin burn. It wasn't the dismissive, mocking look she usually received from men of his caliber. It was a look of absolute predatory fascination. Celia, suddenly realizing what she had just done, exposing herself to the most dangerous men in Chicago, felt the adrenaline crash. Her face flushed a deep crimson. She hugged the tray tighter to her chest, her anxiety returning full force. I'll just go get the main courses, she stammered in English, turning hastily toward the door. Fermate, Dante commanded. Stop. Celia froze. She turned her head, looking back at him. Dante slowly walked around the edge of the mahogany table, approaching her. Up close, he was even more intimidating. He smelled of expensive cedar cologne and gunpowder. He stopped inches from her, forcing Celia to tilt her head up to meet his dark, burning gaze. He looked her up and down, not with disgust at her size, but with a terrifyingly possessive hunger. Who the hell are you? He asked, his voice a low, rough whisper. Cecilia, she squeaked. Celia Higgins. I'm just your waitress. Bullshit, Dante said softly. He stepped closer, his chest almost brushing the edge of her silver tray. Waitresses don't diffuse international syndicate wars between appetizers. You speak Russian, French, German, and Spanish. Celia swallowed hard, her linguistic pride flaring up past her fear just for a second. And Italian, she corrected quietly. Specifically the Sicilian dialect your grandmother likely spoke based on the specific expletives you were using earlier. Dante's eyes widened slightly, a genuine startled laugh escaping his chest. The sound sent a shiver straight down Celia's spine. He reached into his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills. He didn't hand them to her. He tossed the entire stack onto the nearest empty table. It was easily $10,000. Tell your manager you quit, Dante said, his tone leaving absolutely no room for argument. Excuse me, Celia gasped. I can't quit. I have rent, I have bills, You work for me now, Dante interrupted smoothly, reaching out. To Celia's absolute shock, his large, warm hand gently cupped her jaw. His thumb brushed over her flushed cheek. I need a translator, and it seems I just found the most valuable woman in Chicago. I'm not getting involved in the Mafia, Celia hissed, stepping back, swatting his hand away, despite the terror screaming in her brain. I'm a normal person. I eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's every night and watch documentaries. I don't do guns." Dante smiled, a slow, dangerous curving of his lips that made Celia's breath hitch. "You just saved my life, Celia. In my world, that makes you mine to protect. The Irish who killed my translator will find out someone else stepped in to finish the deal tonight. If you walk out that door as a normal waitress, you'll be dead by morning." Celia felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at the 4 mob bosses sitting at the table, all of whom were watching her with newfound respect and dangerous realization. "You have 2 choices," Dante said, his voice softening, a strange protective warmth bleeding into his harsh tone. "You walk out that door alone, or you sit down at my right hand, translate the rest of this meeting, and become the most protected woman in this city." Celia looked at the door. Then she looked at the $10,000. Finally, she looked at the gorgeous, terrifying Mafia boss, who was looking at her, really, truly looking at her like she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. Slowly, Celia set her tray down on a side table. She untied her crisp white apron, letting it fall to the floor. "What's the next course of the negotiation?" Celia asked, smoothing down her black uniform skirt as she walked toward the empty chair at Dante's right. Dante's smile widened, triumphant and dark. "Gentlemen," he said, switching back to English, never taking his eyes off Celia. "Let's talk business." Dante Romano did not do things by halves. When he told Celia she belonged to him, he backed it up with terrifying efficiency. Within hours, she was relocated to his fortress-like compound on the outskirts of Chicago. A team of luxury tailors had been brought in, replacing her cheap cotton uniforms with custom-made silk blouses, tailored slacks, and cashmere cardigans designed specifically to flatter her 250-pound frame. For the first time in her life, a man looked at her soft stomach, her thick thighs and her wide hips, not as flaws to be hidden, but as masterpieces to be adorned. Dante's gaze followed her with a dark, burning reverence that made her pulse race. But Celia wasn't brought here just to be a trophy. She was here to work. "Anything?" Dante asked, stepping into the massive library. He bypassed the empty chairs and came to stand directly behind Celia, resting his large, calloused hands on her shoulders. The heat of his palms seeped through her silk blouse. "Tommy said the dive team pulled this from Leo's ruined briefcase," Celia muttered, leaning closer to the smeared ink on the dried pages. "It looks like a standard ledger for the O'Hare port bribes, but the marginalia, the notes scribbled in the edges, they're bizarre. Gibberish." Tommy Dante's second-in-command grunted from the corner of the room where he was cleaning a Glock 19. The guys in the tech department ran it through standard decryption software. Caesar shifts Visionaire ciphers. Nothing came back. It's just random letters. Celia adjusted her reading glasses, her eyes scanning the bizarre syntax. "It's not random," she murmured, a thrill of academic excitement piercing through her lingering anxiety. "Computers fail when they look for mathematical patterns in human linguistic anomalies. Leo wasn't using a mathematical cipher. He was using a language isolate." Dante leaned down his cheek, brushing her hair. "Explain Mia Cara. My former advisor at Georgetown doctor. Percival Penhaligon specialized in dead and isolated languages." Celia explained, her finger tracing a particularly dense block of text. "Languages that have no genealogical relationship to any other language on Earth. This isn't a code. It's Euskara, Basque, spoken in a tiny region between Spain and France. It has no linguistic relatives. Unless you know its specific morphological structure, a computer algorithm will just read it as chaotic noise." Tommy stopped cleaning his gun. "You speak Basque." "I read it," Celia corrected. "I wrote a 20-page paper on its ergative-absolutive alignment." She grabbed a fresh notepad and a pen. "Give me 10 minutes." Silence descended on the library, broken only by the furious scratching of Celia's pen. Dante didn't move from behind her. He stood like a sentinel, his thumb rhythmically stroking the side of her neck, in a gesture so intimately possessive it made Celia's breath hitch. She forced herself to focus, translating the complex alien syntax into English. As the words formed on her notepad, a cold dread pooled in Celia's stomach. She stopped writing, the pen slipping from her fingers to clatter against the desk. "Dante!" Celia whispered, her voice trembling. "What is it?" His tone was instantly sharp, the protective warmth vanishing into icy lethality. "Leo wasn't killed by the Irish mob to disrupt your meeting," Celia said, handing the translated page over her shoulder. "Leo was working for the Irish mob, the O'Connor family. These are detailed notes outlining your compound's security rotation, the blind spots in the camera network, and the exact timetable of your shipments. He was feeding Declan O'Connor everything." Dante stared at the paper. The muscles in his jaw ticked. If Leo was their mole, why did they kill him? They didn't. Celia realized, her mind connecting the terrifying dots. The translation says Leo faked his death. The car in the river was a decoy. He's alive, Dante. And the last entry. She pointed to the bottom of the page, her finger shaking. It says Phase 2 commences at the Palmer House Gala. Romano will be isolated. Tommy swore violently, dropping the rag he was holding. "Boss, the Palmer House Gala is tonight, the charity event for the pediatric ward. You're supposed to meet the mayor there in 2 hours." Dante's eyes darkened into a terrifying, pitch-black void. The betrayal stung, but the immediate threat snapped his predatory instincts to the forefront. "We cancel," Tommy urged. "We lock down the compound." "No," Dante said, his voice a low, lethal purr. He looked down at Celia, his expression softening just a fraction, though the violence in his eyes remained. "If we cancel, Declan O'Connor knows we cracked his mole. We walk into the gala. We isolate O'Connor. And we end this." "I'm staying here then," Celia said, already pushing her chair back. "I translated the book. My job is done for the night. I'll just be in my room." Locking the door. Dante reached down, his strong hands gripping her waist and easily lifting her to her feet. He pulled her flush against his solid chest. Celia gasped, her hands instinctively resting on his lapels. "You aren't going anywhere without me, Celia." Dante murmured, his lips a breath away from hers. "You are the only person in my organization I currently trust. Furthermore, you are a linguistic genius who just saved my empire for the second time in 3 days. You are coming to the gala. You are standing by my side. And I am going to show the entire Chicago underworld exactly who my queen is." Celia swallowed hard, looking up into his fierce, beautiful face. "I don't have a dress." Dante smiled, a dark, devastating smirk. "I took the liberty of anticipating this." Crystal chandeliers cast a blinding, fractured light over the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton. The room was packed with Chicago's elite politicians, socialites, and men whose wealth was built on blood. Celia stood near the edge of the room, feeling like a goddess wrapped in armor. Dante's tailors had provided a breathtaking floor-length gown of deep emerald silk. It hugged her generous curves perfectly, the plunging neckline and cinched waist making her look powerful, wealthy, and dangerously beautiful. Beside her, Dante looked like a god of war in a midnight blue tuxedo, his hand resting firmly on the small of her back. Every eye in the room had tracked them since they walked in. The whispers were deafening, Dante Romano notorious for his ruthless solitude, parading a beautiful plus-sized woman with a protective ferocity that dared anyone to look at her sideways. "Breathe," Dante whispered, leaning close to her ear. "You look magnificent. Declan is across the room. By the ice sculpture." Celia subtly shifted her gaze. Declan O'Connor was a tall, sharply dressed man with reddish-blonde hair and a charming smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. He was flanked by 3 massive bodyguards. "He's looking at you," Celia murmured, sipping her champagne to hide her moving lips. "He looks confused. He didn't expect you to bring a +1. "I brought my deadliest weapon," Dante corrected smoothly. "Keep your ears open, Celia. Leo is likely in this building. Declan won't act without his inside man." Celia nodded, her senses dialed up to maximum. She tuned out the jazz band and the clinking glasses, focusing entirely on the cacophony of voices around her. She filtered out English, letting her brain scan for anomalies. 10 minutes passed. Dante engaged in polite, venomous small talk with a city alderman, keeping Celia tucked safely against his side. Then Celia heard it. It wasn't Irish Gaelic. It wasn't English. It was a rapid, hushed mutter in Low Street Dutch, coming from a waiter passing behind them with a tray of empty glasses. "Het doel is in positie. Wacht op het teken de lichten uit te doen." Celia's blood ran cold. She knew the dialect. It was a specific slang used by mercenaries out of Rotterdam. "The target is in position. Wait for the signal to cut the lights." Without hesitating, Celia grabbed Dante's bicep, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his tuxedo jacket. "Rotterdam hit squad." She breathed in rapid-fire Italian, knowing no one around them would catch the quick Sicilian dialect. The waiter. "They're going to cut the power." Now Dante. Dante didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. His reaction was explosive and instantaneous. He grabbed Celia by the waist, hauling her behind the thick marble pillar of the ballroom, just as the chandeliers violently sparked and the entire room plunged into absolute darkness. Screams erupted. Glass shattered. The silenced thwip-thwip of suppressed gunfire cut through the chaos bullets, chewing into the plaster where Dante and Celia had been standing, a fraction of a second before. "Tommy!" Dante roared over the din. Flashes of muzzle fire illuminated the darkness like strobe lights. Celia squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her hands over her ears, as Dante shielded her body completely with his own, his heavy weapon drawn and returning fire with deadly accuracy. He moved with terrifying grace, his arm never leaving Celia, protecting her with a ferocious desperation. "Hij zit achter de pilaar," a voice shouted nearby in Dutch. "He's behind the pillar. 3 o'clock!" Celia screamed to Dante. Dante pivoted, firing twice. A heavy body hit the floor. Suddenly the backup generators kicked in. The emergency lights bathed the ballroom in a harsh yellow glow. The panicked crowd had completely scattered, leaving the center of the room, empty save for the bodies. Standing 30 feet away holding a customized assault rifle was Leo, the missing translator. He looked panicked, realizing his ambush had failed spectacularly. Declan O'Connor was nowhere to be seen, having cowardly abandoned his men the moment the trap sprung shut. Leo aimed his rifle directly at Dante. "Drop it, Leo," Dante said, his voice echoing in the sudden ringing silence of the room. He stepped slightly in front of Celia, his gun leveled at his former employee. "You were dead anyway, Romano." Leo spat his hands, shaking. "The Irish promised me 2 million. I just had to get you in the dark." He looked at Celia, pure hatred twisting his features. "And you fat bitch. You ruined everything. You translated the notebook." Dante didn't say a word. He didn't offer a dramatic villain speech. He simply pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening. Leo collapsed backward, his rifle clattering uselessly against the polished floor. The room was deathly quiet, save for the distant wail of approaching sirens. Dante's men quickly moved in, securing the exits, and beginning the rapid process of cleaning up the mess before the police arrived. Dante holstered his weapon. He turned around to face Celia. She was pale, shaking slightly, but she stood tall, her chin raised. She hadn't fainted. She hadn't run. She had stayed right by his side. Dante reached out, pulling her into his chest. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling deeply. "You saved my life. Again. I think we're even now," Celia managed to joke, though her voice wobbled. Dante pulled back, looking deeply into her eyes. The violence was gone, replaced by an overwhelming, possessive adoration. "We are nowhere near even Celia Higgins. I'm going to spend the rest of my life repaying you." He didn't care about the sirens, the bodies, or his staring men. Dante cupped her face and crashed his lips down onto hers. It was a bruising, desperate kiss, full of heat and undeniable claim. Celia melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, finally accepting that she was no longer the invisible wallflower. She was Celia, the translator, the survivor, and the undisputed queen of the Romano Empire. Did Celia's incredible linguistic skills and fierce bravery leave you speechless? If you loved this thrilling tale of a brilliant plus-sized waitress becoming a powerful mafia queen, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this story with your friends who crave intense romance, shocking twists, and badass heroines. Subscribe to our channel for more jaw-dropping, real-life inspired dramas, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.